Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. But good morning, good evening, good afternoon, everyone, wherever you're located at. Thank you so much for joining us today and welcome to the Hive Think Tank webinar series. So my name's Olivia. I'm the operations manager at the Hive in Silicon Valley, and we're super excited to have you join us and hear from our amazing expert panel speakers from Applied Materials, UiPath, Sonnet.io, and SAP. So with that, I'm going to quickly go over some of today's best practices and explain what the Hive Think Tank does. And then I'm going to pass it over to Ravi, who is the Hive's founder and managing director. And then he'll introduce Eric, who will be moderating the session. So we do love questions. So we'd love for the audience to utilize the Q&A button and not the general chat box at the bottom of your screen to ask our presenters any questions, which they'll do so throughout the events. And then the session is also being recorded and will be available later tomorrow on our YouTube channel. So the Hive Think Tank is an ecosystem of thought leaders, corporations, and entrepreneurs. We're an event and content platform with a focus on AI, cybersecurity, future work, fintech, and so much more. We do host events almost every other week on different kind of cutting edge topics in technology and business. So we'd love for the audience to join our meetup group and newsletter to stay up to date on some of our upcoming events. And I'll link everything in the chat box below. And lastly, I just want to give our sponsors Avanta Ventures and Gamuda for their support. And if anyone is interested in getting involved with the Hive Think Tank, feel free to reach out to me directly. And then also make sure to follow us on LinkedIn and Twitter. So let me go ahead and pass it over to Ravi to talk more about the Hive and introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Olivia. So very briefly about the Hive. The Hive hosts the Hive Think Tank, this thought leadership forum that you are today a part of. The Hive itself is a venture capital fund, an early stage investor in startup companies focused on data and AI. And our key focus tends to be around the enterprise and related kind of areas. If you are an early stage founder, we would love to chat with you. Just drop us a line afterwards and we'd love to connect with you. In addition to our presence here in the US, and we're based in Palo Alto, we also have separate funds in Brazil, in Southeast Asia, based in Malaysia, and in India, based in Mumbai and Bangalore. And we'll have a presence in Europe starting early next year. So if you go to the next slide, Olivia. The Hive Think Tank has two series of events going on right now, one around generative AI and another one on the future of work. Today's event is in this future of work category. And if you go to the next slide. I'm especially pleased to introduce my good friend, a good friend of the Hive, someone we've known for a long time, Dr. Eric Meckelberg. Eric runs sales for a large part of America for SAP. And with that, I'll hand it over to Eric.
Thank you very much, Ravi. And thanks, Olivia. Appreciate the intro. Hello and welcome, everybody. Really look forward to today's discussion. As Ravi had mentioned, I'm a regional VP here at SAP, working in our customer success team. And my team works primarily with large enterprise firms across many different industries in the West, 18 different industries. And one of the things I find really intriguing is how companies approach innovation projects and strategic transformation. And the particular nuance we want to take a look at and discuss about today is driving innovation with rapid approaches and rapid steps. And why is this important, right? It's important because if you think about innovation, a lot of people would think of long payback periods, it being really costly, high risk project, very challenging for the business and high uncertainty because of in the outcome. Now, what's interesting with new methods of digital transformation is there are ways of really easing I'd say the financial strain, but also de-risking those innovation projects with new technologies. That's really what we want to talk about today. We want to talk about how we multiply resources, how we ease constraints on resources, and how we really drive transparency and how we can reduce governance issues as it pertains to innovation. I am so pleased to introduce my wonderful panel of experts on this topic. Let me introduce first Junaid. Junaid Ahmed. Junaid, you're a corporate VP at Applied Materials, looking after finance, specifically global FP&A, systems and integration, and indirect procurement. And you've also recently started an initiative called Agile Finance. I'd love to give it over to you and share a little bit more about that with the audience.
Yeah, Eric, great to be here. So it's always good to talk to you. A little bit about Applied. So Applied Materials, for the audience, is the world's largest semiconductor equipment maker. From what it does is Applied's material engineering solutions really help enable the fundamental atomic level innovation required for semiconductors. And this in itself really drives the entire tech ecosystem. So we play a really important role in the whole value chain for the technology industry overall. A little bit about the initiative that Eric mentioned. So about four and a half years ago now, time flies. We were just coming off, the company had doubled in size as the industry grew structurally larger on the back of the mobile and cloud wave, right? And as we looked ahead, we saw that we were going to get another really a meaningful growth spurt on the back of AI big data that was just beginning at that time. And so what we figured out that we had to really rethink the way finance operates at Applied if we were going to be able to scale the organization. So we established Agile Finance with three strategic goals. Number one, to scale the organization and increase effectiveness of the organization in support of the company's growth objectives. Number two, improve work-life balance for our employees and career fulfillment. So we wanted to retain our really valuable employees who had a lot of institutional knowledge and grow with the company. And then last but not least, move finance to a digital operating model, one that would allow us to really drive greater business agility across the enterprise. Those were the key strategic goals. That was the initiative, and we could get more into it, Eric, through the session.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Junaid. Let me go over to my next guest, Alex Newton. Hi, Alex. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me.
Alex, you're senior director at UiPath, primarily looking after customer success. And what I find interesting about your background is you actually started with a consulting firm, PwC, working on outsourcing and shared services consulting, which I think is a phenomenal background to talk about today's topic. But also you are actively building methodologies and best practices as it pertains to really using automation in a strategic and operational way. So I'm really eager to hear from you, but why don't you give us a little bit more on UiPath?
Sure. So UiPath is a business automation platform. What that means, and I'm sure all of you are very well familiar with the challenges of technology fragmentation and kind of humans being really the linkage between different processes and systems and kind of forcing them to carry the burden that Junaid had just talked about and the initiative with Agile Finance. What UiPath allows businesses to do is automate the manual processes that exist today that start to stitch those systems, whether that's through the front UX or through back-end kind of system integration. And not only automating kind of what people do today, but automating what organizations would love to do, but have the resource limitations and are unable to do. Like Eric mentioned, I started my career in shared services and outsourcing. And when RPA really came to the market, it was seen as just kind of that next lever of labor arbitrage. As the market has matured and the product has matured, we've really been trying to fight against the notion that this is just purely time savings or productivity savings. And the platform has evolved to kind of support that story. So it's no longer just robotic process automation, which is really rules-based kind of manual tasks, but it's expanded into things like intelligent document processing, communications mining, being able to support both generalized and specialized AI models. And then, in order to be a really enterprise-grade enterprise platform, there needs to be kind of full governance and management and monitoring capabilities as well. So how do you monitor your digital workforce? How do you provide the right kind of reports and insights to your various stakeholders? And then the product also includes kind of our discovery suite. We'll probably talk a bit, and I actually started my some of my career within UiPath, working closely with Junaid and under Applied Materials. But kind of the old way of trying to, 4 years ago is crazy to me. Oh man, what is time these days? But the old way of trying to identify processes to automate required a lot of workshops and sitting down. And now the platform has evolved to be able to do things like process mining and task mining to try and help automate and identify those automation opportunities. It's created a little bit of a double-edged sword where we can automate anything. So it's not a fit for purpose specific tool. So there's so many opportunities, but we'll talk in detail a bit more. But where we found the most success is being able to work with customers who have a very clear strategic initiative, transformation initiative, like Applied Materials with Agile Finance, and build kind of the automation strategy to support that rather than just pursue digital transformation for the sake of digital transformation.
Awesome. Thank you, Alex. So glad to have you here. And then last, but certainly not least, let me introduce DM. Hi, DM. How are you?
I'm doing very well. Excited to be here.
Awesome. DM, you're the CEO and co-founder of a really innovative startup called Sonnet.io. And you also have a huge background in engineering and getting global cloud services to production at Symantec and Blue Coat and other firms. Why don't you tell us just a little bit more about Sonnet and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, absolutely. Sonnet.io is the only browser-based zero trust workspace for connecting workers to all kinds of applications, whether they are SaaS apps, private apps, even thick clients from any device, just using the browser. You do not need VDIs, agents, or proxies. In terms of rapid innovation, what we are providing is a flexibility to the organization. So they can hire from anywhere, whether they're contractors, gig workers, globally, you can acquire skills from anywhere. And we can connect these workers to SAP applications instantly from any device. All they need is their favorite browser to connect. Using the tools that they need, they are familiar with, we sort of help with the adoption because they're just using whatever tools, whatever device that they are comfortable with to access, let's say, SAP applications. So it's like completely frictionless access. And we provide the user experience first by using the tools they are familiar with, but also providing observability data to IT to constantly improve their experience with all these applications that they are using, helping with that data to troubleshoot, to train on these applications, and providing guardrails to be able to secure the data, given that any user is connecting to these SAP applications containing very sensitive information. So all the observability tools and security is sort of built into the platform itself.
Awesome. Thank you, DM. So glad to have you here. Well, I suggest we jump right in. And I really want to start tackling this from sort of the business angle here, right? And I want to pitch it over to you, Junaid, because what I really want to talk about is, when you think about transformation as a big scary thing, right? Can you tell us your perspective and how Applied Materials and other firms you worked for have looked at this, and why is doing bite-sized transformation really important, especially nowadays in this economy?
Yeah, sure. I can give my perspective. So the way I think about it, or the way I'm sure people are experiencing, is that the business landscape, Eric, is not only getting more complex, but it's getting more dynamic, right? It feels that the cycles are faster, but also a large part of this is because of all the digital transformation with the global economy digitizing. And then what does that mean? Well, business models are getting impacted. The way companies operate is changing. So both suppliers and customers, are impacted by that. So change is being driven across entire value chains, right? Entire industries. And so the rapid pace of that change is accelerating. It's not, it's only accelerating. So what one must do, if you remember, in the old days, transformation was this long project, okay, multiple years.
Right.
And I think because of that, I would speculate that it got a negative connotation. Oh my God, here we go again. multiple years, it's going to suck up my bandwidth, and nothing's really going to come out the other side, and it's going to change, and they're going to cancel it, bring something. Anyway, that doesn't work. Why? Because it has no meaning. If you're going to take 5 years to do something, if you're going to take 3 years to do something, it's already too late. 3 years too late, right? So you have to figure out how are you going to transform in bite-sized chunks, like you say, in order to actually have an impact. Because otherwise, it's just like, what's the objective here, and I think about it from two perspectives. The organization perspective, what do we have to get done given this change is coming, to be able to enable something or build new capabilities, or address deficiencies quickly, but also from the employee standpoint, right? How can you get employees the mind share? How can you get their mind share to be able to actually contribute to the transformation, which is core to the success? So I would just say the rapid dynamic nature of the business landscape today, it really requires you to be able to transform in meaningful ways in a reasonable amount of time. That's how I would think about it.
That's a great perspective. Thank you. I want to expand on that, Alex. I'm going to toss this one over to you. Basically, you work with a lot of firms out there, right? And you've seen different types of transformation over the years. What are your thoughts in terms of the constraints and kind of the traditional modes of execution of projects, and what does that mean to transformation today?
Yeah, I mean, I would second everything that Junaid had mentioned. Kind of the old approach was top-down, resource-intensive, cost-intensive. The systems that were being built were quite rigid in nature and not necessarily easily agile and able to adopt. And so it was a slow process. I think also to the point of rapid technology innovation, even today in our work, when we're working with customers to build a pipeline of automation opportunities, we're hesitant even putting something on a roadmap to automate in 6 months, because the technology that we're using is evolving so quickly, and the ways in which to optimize the process and tools at our disposal are just constantly changing. So needing to kind of plan for that and respond to that. I'll also kind of build on the cultural piece and the innovation piece. I think early on in my career, those transformation initiatives just felt like something happening in kind of some secret room where you weren't really engaged with them as an employee. Now there is an expectation of employees joining the workforce to be a part of some of that change and to have a voice. And so the kind of cultural need to bring folks along the journey and to kind of instill that cultural mindset is top of mind, in addition to customer expectations and the need for businesses to be able to pivot and evolve kind of on a dime as the needs of the market evolve.
That's a great perspective. I want to tap on one thing you said, Alex, which I think is really interesting, which is around kind of the changing nature of the environment we're in terms of the system landscape too. And Dia, maybe you can share your perspective on this, right? There's also an interesting question from Andrew, who asked if there's a common systems architecture for this kind of new way of innovating. What do you think about that, Dia?
Yeah, so I think these days we are coming up with these no-code or low-code platforms like SAP Build, and what's happening is that they are sort of reducing the complexity of these tools, so you can focus on the business problems, workflow automations, and so we are sort of reducing the barrier. What that means is that you can actually tap a global marketplace to acquire skills to get the work done. And it can be done in, given the complexity of the tools is going down, the skills required is going down. So you can actually do rapid transformation by hiring people for few weeks, as opposed to years and months that we were referring to. But what we need is to be able to enable a rapid access, to give access to the tools they need to automate this the workflows or the process automation. And so that's where sort of we come in. We are building the cloud service to be able to access to these tools straight from the browsers. And the other thing I think we need is that, these are relatively new technologies. And so you do need to train and train the workforce on these new tools. And so we need sort of like, they need a helping hand to be able to understand these tools, for somebody to observe what's going on, what kind of issues that they are running into. So we need all these ways of monitoring to help them get past the initial learning curve, although the complexity has reduced. So we can basically expand the talent pool to be able to initiate a business transformation in many, many enterprises. And I think that also there is the AI aspect of thing that is driving productivity. And there's always this concern of data leak through these AI tools, and many organizations are actually banning them. But what we need to really do is to enable by also providing guardrails where you can protect your data, but still be able to provide that productivity boost to your workers. So basically at Sonnet, we are building guardrails where you cannot leak data into an AI tool or get data from an AI tool into your application. So we're providing those guardrails to protect the data, but still make the workers productive.
That's really interesting. Thank you for sharing that, DM. And you combine two critical issues there, Rich. One is the ability from a tools perspective, right, to do rapid innovation, the guardrails around it, but also being able to tap into talent marketplaces, right? There are talent shortages specifically in tech nowadays in order to realize these projects. And one of the things that I see a lot of customers do from the SAP perspective is a lot of firms are now looking at, well, how can we use platforms that are really optimized towards implementing a use case extremely rapidly, right? We've got this thing, and you mentioned, DM, we've got this thing called Build that our company launched, which is essentially a set of low-code building blocks that you can use to enable, custom apps or enhancements to business capability very quickly. So that's really interesting. Alex, how does UiPath do that? Like, what does UiPath do to really enable this rapid innovation?
Yeah. I mean, I think probably the simplest part of the answer is our product is something that can be implemented in as short as 2 weeks. Really, really complex use cases can have a 12 to 14-week development timeline, but a use case and an opportunity is something that, with the right kind of governance and resources and support, can be identified, ideated, and put into production immediately. Through the pandemic, we had so many customers, particularly in the government space, who were responding to unemployment claims, who had a critical business need, and we were able to identify, the automation opportunity. Well, we didn't really have to identify it; the world identified it for us, but able to design, rapidly build, and support and put that into production where it's handling thousands of claims within a few weeks. So just
that's a great
ease,
story.
Yeah. So just kind of the ease of build. I will correct myself by, I think we used to say kind of years ago, oh, it's so easy and anyone can do it. And I think Junaid would be able to say, it's not that easy. It's a bit difficult. It's a slog. But it can be a quick process when you have the right kind of governance and resources around it. I think another really big area that we like to talk about and play in at UiPath is really the democratization of this technology. Yes, there is kind of COE-driven automation, and that is kind of, enterprise-led and has a lot of governance and rigor around it. But the low-code, no-code platforms are able to really be put in the hands of employees, both employees who have absolutely no kind of technical background, those that may have build incredible and impressive macros for the business and are able to kind of build some really compelling automations. And not only do you kind of democratize the developer resources that you have, so you're able to output more quickly, you're also able to help that cultural component and really get kind of automation and innovation and challenging kind of the process quo as a part of how teams operate, even if you aren't necessarily someone who is doing citizen development, but you have a friend in your team who does citizen development, you're constantly thinking of kind of the way to change some of those processes.
Right.
I also think that kind of from the AI space, if we think of automating, you know, a process with AI, you know, generalized or specialized capabilities, there's kind of the upfront context gathering, there's the decision making, and there's the action. And you're able to kind of automate pieces of that process in a disparate way, where you're automating maybe the actions first and upfront context gathering next, and then once you're kind of exploring kind of AI models, you're doing kind of the decisioning for that end-to-end process. So it allows you to take kind of pieces of the process and then eventually stitch them together, rather than going, you know, 8 months in a room,
Right.
mapping it out, and then kind of putting it into production.
It's a very rapid prototyping type approach, right? Junaid, I want to ask, can you share some, you've done this in real life for 4 years now, right? You've done dozens of projects. Can you share a little bit in terms of what areas you targeted for this type of innovation approach and how you build up that sort of scaffolding of execution?
Yeah, sure. We leveraged the UiPath very effectively for our transactional finance processes, and you know, just to give some stats for UiPath, we did like roughly build 300 automations, and I think the hardest part we were able to accomplish is do that in about 14 months. So it was a very fragmented, the way we use UiPath. So one has to think about what the strategy is, right? You have a lot of technology in the marketplace. And the way we used UiPath was we had some big platforms that we had for specific process domains. And then we realized that there's still a lot of white space in between those platforms. And it's fragmented work effort, and we wanted to automate it. And that's where UiPath came, you know, we leveraged their platform, which was great. So we automated a lot of fragmented use cases, which, you know, didn't by itself have the ROI to go and get new technology for, but the RPA technology from UiPath allowed us to really build that use case. And yeah, we were able to really leverage that, Eric, and we built a whole bunch of very, very diverse set of
I love that idea of doing the white space in between systems. I've never looked at it that way. That's really brilliant.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. And then we've done, obviously, like I said, we have other big planning platform. We have our accounting platform. We have treasury management. So we did some big platforms. We also did internally, we built some AI machine learning models, Eric, for our revenue and margin forecasting process, which was, I think, also a big win for us. We were able to decrease our bottoms-up forecasting for outer quarters that we did twice a quarter. It took us 3 weeks roughly to get that forecast together. We were able to collapse that to 1 week. Wow. And on a bottoms-up, not tops-down, bottoms-up, but we did that through building machine learning models for our costing that we did. So, you know, the finance team, once the revenue plan, the system that is shipping is set, then you go cost those to really get the gross margin accurate, right? And what we did was we took 3 years of data from an SAP platform, and we used that as a golden data set, and we built machine learning models to do a matching algorithm so we could figure out customer product, and then really have the machine cost it effectively to a decent amount, a pretty good high level of accuracy. And then that way, every week we could get this plan together, which is pretty 90% accurate. And then when we get to the final end, you know, guidance, when we really have to draw the line, then it's very small tweaks every week instead of one big crank. And the 3 weeks you crank it, you're already, it's like you know, like I said, you're already out of, it's already old. You have to do it again. So yeah, so we leveraged technology in ways which, again, for us was, how do we get to these objectives, right? You start with the objectives, you have a whole portfolio of technology available for you, and you leverage it in a way where you get to your goals in a meaningful amount of time. That's kind of what we did.
Yeah, I love that. I love that whole stacking up to. It's the credibility building approach to doing these types of projects. That's really the neat thing about it. DM, I had a question I wanted to expand on some point you mentioned earlier, right? Which is kind of this idea of well, I don't have enough resources in-house. I want to tap into an external workforce. Now, for many firms, it's extremely difficult to onboard, offboard external workforce on a project-by-project basis. How do you guys help organizations with that, DM? I think you're on mute, DM. If you could unmute yourself, that'd be great.
Yeah, sorry about that.
No worries, all good.
Yeah. Yeah, so I think that if the organizations want to tap a global talent pool, I think first of all, we need to provide tools that these users are used to of in their personal workspace, which is basically browsers. And so we want to, so we enable access from the browsers to all the enterprise tools, not just a subset, whether it's a web application, SaaS apps, servers, but also thick clients. So we basically now we are able to essentially convert a thick client into a web app. And so you can access all these tools directly from the browser. So they can essentially access, let's say, SAP S/4HANA thick client straight from the browser without any deployments. And so that takes away the onboarding time from IT perspective. You are no longer shipping devices or racking, stacking servers, building complex VDI solutions that tries to emulate a PC. They just get the right application straight delivered to their browser. No overhead of VDI or shipping. And so, the goal of these low-code platforms is to get the project done in weeks. And so we cannot spend weeks to onboard them. So we need to reduce the onboarding time in like minutes. And so that's what we enable them to do. And then I think the other aspect of tapping a global workforce is that as these platforms, the low-code platforms are evolving, and the access solutions need to evolve as well. So if it's a visual platform to do development or automate a process solution, then I think that we need to provide observability as well accordingly, a visual observability. Essentially, you record the sessions and be able to see what the remote worker is seeing to be able to train them, troubleshoot, and so we provide all that within Sonnet.io to be able to enable the entire global workforce. And we also provide sort of the guardrails. Essentially, you are connecting a user with highly sensitive data. And so we provide inbuilt guardrails to be able to,
Awesome.
Block uploads, downloads, etc., to be to do the.
I think that's really interesting, and it actually taps into this, right? If I have this low code, there's a really interesting question from the audience here, which is, a comparison of the assembly line, which was the automation of mechanical work, 100 years ago, and now we've got these low code, no code platforms, RPA platforms. Is that analogous just for the automation of information work? And are we seeing these tools to help humans or replace humans? Alex, what's your perspective on this?
Yeah, I think to the first part of the question, yeah, that's a great analogy. To the second part of the question, I really see it as a tool to help the human. I have sat in, it'll be interesting to calculate the amount of hours of process meetings and process understanding and process mapping. And I think there is always going to be these corner case scenarios and decisioning that is going to be required and have to sit with a human. But hopefully over time, we start to build tools and resources to take all of the super transactional, mundane, rules-based work off people's plate, and then be able to provide them with much richer information and context that they don't have that access to now, to then do more of that kind of creative personnel management, relationship management, strategic work.
What's your perspective, Janae, on this? What have you seen as you go through these projects and automation in terms of the organizational change?
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Alex. For us, it's always been an augmentation play. And for, in the foreseeable future, even with generative AI, all the use cases are, to augment workers. Eventually, hey, who knows where things go? But, I think all of these platforms and whatever AI, you know, there's the old AI, machine learning, deep learning, there's the new AI, generative AI. So, but it's all about driving, getting you to outcomes faster and more efficiently, and getting richer outcomes. That's the way I think about it. I mean, if you think about large learning models and that whole generative AI capability, you know, hey, you have to rethink your operating model. How do you leverage this capability? So I think whatever platforms you stitch together, you have to think about what's your end objective, which is very much to do with workers, because someone somewhere has to make a decision.
Right.
And, you know, when we get to the point all machines make all the decisions, well, okay, we won't be on this webinar. You'll be talking to some chatbot. But at some point today and the foreseeable future, someone has to make decisions. And that decision process you have to break down, and how can you enable that decision process most effectively, right? Some of it is, hey, there's just stuff that needs to get done, like Alex is talking, rules-based work, but it has to get done, right? We have to close the books. We have to record these entries diligently, and we have to, but there's more complex stuff that also needs to do. So I would just say, yeah, for me, it's very much these technologies that are augmenting our people and making them much more productive, which is a big lever for the company.
Fascinating. You know, I was at an academic conference a couple of months ago, and this was a forecasting conference, and one of the keynote speakers was from the World Bank, and he made this really interesting statement. Like, they did a bunch of research in terms of growth, right? Economic growth around the world in different countries, and he peeled back the onion, right? What are the drivers of economic growth? And you look at the economic growth drivers in the US, and it's really comes down to three main drivers of capital, invested capital, of labor, and of productivity. And if you think about those three factors, right, capital isn't going to change much over the next 10 years. Labor is actually going to decrease by about 10% because of demographic changes that we're seeing. So we're really banking on productivity to make up that 10%, and then on top of that, lead us to a 2 to 3% growth rate per year at least. So we kind of have to, this is really interesting. He made this point of, we have to bank on AI and automation to be able to make up that 15-20% gap in terms of labor productivity over the next 10 years. I found that really fascinating. And you look at that, right? Labor market, we're at a historically low unemployment rate and have been at a sustained low unemployment rate for years. So I think that that's a really interesting and informative data point to say there's really, I think, very little threat from automation. It's about optimizing what we invest our time in so we can actually sustain a growing economy.
Eric, just to double on that, 100%. So just for the semiconductor industry, right? We think most projections put semiconductor industry growing to $1 trillion somewhere around 2030. All right. And if we look at our own projections of how many people we need to hire, right, that skill set is going to be, that's a challenging equation.
Right.
To get that skill set, especially with the sourcing of or the building of semiconductor chips in the US now, you know, that's very real and today's problem now for many companies to meet the strategic goals of the US, for example.
Right.
So the productivity, you know, that increase is a must do. And so all of this, like you said, from that analysis you quoted, I mean, we're facing it today. We have to increase this productivity equation for all our employees, because if you're just banking on hiring more people, you know, that's not an easy goal to execute on. That's
right. Exactly. Totally agree. There's actually a really interesting lead into another audience question here from Octavia, which is, she's saying that, you know, the discussion we're having reminds her of the power users of the 80s and 90s, right? When they were able to share with the general user community how to use systems appropriately and really kind of be the trainer. How are you seeing a power user of today using things like low code and process automation? Alex, what are your thoughts on that?
So the power users of the 80s and 90s, I don't know how familiar I am with that concept. unfortunately. But how we think about power users within UiPath are these kind of citizen developers with this next level of expertise and fully democratizing kind of the platform to them so they can almost be the conduit for those lower and medium complexity processes that their teams identify. We actually break it down into kind of two archetypes. One would be the self-user. That's someone with probably kind of more of an elementary understanding of automation, not as much interest in building kind of complex tasks. And they're just really automating kind of processes for themselves that they would really use and consume, whereas that power user is not necessarily part of the COE, but they are able to build automations for their team and through kind of the right governance guardrails and kind of risk management channels, able to publish that for other parts of the organization to use. I know, and I think this was even something we had talked about at Applied, where there are just so many kind of macros or that type of automation that exists across the enterprise, things that don't really provide the level of kind of insight and transparency that makes IT organizations much more comfortable and know kind of what process are being run. And so these kind of tools with the right type of governance and management capabilities allow you to kind of democratize and push that to employees while also having kind of the right insights and avoiding more of that shadow IT mentality.
Got it. That's really fascinating. Now, one thought I want to lead over to another topic here that we really haven't covered much yet, which is, so we talked a lot about, you know, the strategic need to do innovation much faster and sort of the what to focus on, but we haven't really spent a lot of time talking about the how. So I want to talk a little bit more about that. And Dia, maybe I can toss this one to you. You know, in real world scenarios, how do people actually identify external talent to be able to work on their projects for them, and how does this work in organizations? What are you seeing today?
Yeah, so I think that so one of the use cases that we often run into is to be able to employ support folks or vendors, partners, employees to be able to augment the business and to acquire the skills they need. But the challenge is that we see is, again, identified the talent, but then how do you make them productive? How do you get them going on whatever projects that you are working on? And that's basically where they get stuck because they do not have the right tools. I think we were talking about
Right.
the AI augmenting humans. I think that's where all that comes into play. I think the systems have become so complex. We need tools, modern tools, to be able to make them effective. So instead of like the old-fashioned shipping devices, VDIs, we need efficient systems to access the tools and give them sort of the AI tools to be able to help them able to build innovation on top, because the systems are getting more and more complex. And we need these modern tools to be able to connect, the support that they are getting from another organization to be able to get the work done into their companies.
Thank you. That's awesome. Thanks, DM. And Junaid, I'm curious, from a real world example from Applied, right? This is a method of doing projects that was very unusual. Right? Applied wasn't at all used to operating projects at that rapid pace that you described, and in this kind of iterative fashion. How did this work organizationally? How did you get the organizational support, and what did people think as they were working on this?
Yeah, definitely. So maybe I'll lay out some key learnings, Eric, that
that'd be
we've
great.
had
Yeah.
through the multiple projects we did. And I put them in 3 buckets. First one is the alignment bucket. So what do I mean by that? You have to get institutional support from the organization, from the key leaders where you're going to engage, right? So everyone can say, yes, 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 I'm supportive. Where does the rubber hit the road? When you need their people, okay? So when institutional support, very important, because when you need those resources, they will come and they'll join that meeting. You need to communicate, right? You need to communicate the why, not just for why we in finance are doing this, but what's in it for the employee. Why should they actually participate because so much learning is
Right.
the opportunity. And then the goals, many a time I've seen organizations have these transformation goals alone, hanging out in the ether, and then people wonder why it gets lost, right? And people lose mind share, because tie it to what the company or your organization is actually trying to get done in the next year, next 2 years. Make it relevant. So that's alignment, aligning to stakeholders, aligning your employees, whoever you need, right? Be they into your organization or outsider, and then aligning your goals. Then the strategy piece is all about, we already talked about it, platform strategy. Think about platforms. So what's the best technology? What's the best fit for what you're trying to get done? Don't just try to nail in one technology everywhere. Project leads, we did this, which was, I think, not common. All our projects were run by people who ran that process area or domain area for finance. We didn't have a central team, right? What that gives you is the team that's most set to benefit from, if the project's successful, is leading the project. They're going to benefit. They know where the obstacles are. They're going to get you the best solution because they've been living it day in, day out. So they're incentivized, if you empower them in the right way, to give you the best solution. And then cross-functional teams, right? You want functional domain, you want platform domain, and then you want integration domain. If you're going to do things fast, you're going to get all the knowledge on the team. There's no throwing things over the fence. You move fast. All the knowledge has to be in the room. Okay, when you're moving the train fast. Then you talk about value realization. The last bucket. Everyone talks about quick wins. I talk about meaningful wins that need to be quickly done. Right. Your early wins are your momentum drivers. Right. So then you need to capture people's mind share. Wow, they did this and it had that impact. Well, I want some of that, right? I want some of that technology. You do something quick, you go around with the victory flag, no one cares. So what use is it, right? People wink an eye and say, so what? So you have to have quick wins, but it have to be meaningful. The execution, leverage the diverse team. If you're moving fast, again, leverage the diverse knowledge in the team. And then lastly, the time to value, right? You want to capture value fast, but it also helps you capture mind share of people. When they can see the light at the end of the tunnel, people want to be in, they can see it, they can visualize it, then they're really contributing, because a lot of this comes around discretionary effort, Eric, right? Let's be honest. You're not going to get the whole project team to be new people, dedicated, because then you don't have the institutional knowledge.
Right.
You can hire a separate team. They don't have any knowledge. They go bug the same people you're trying to get in the first place. So you have to get people to give you discretionary effort, because they're incentivized in the right way, and they're empowered to make this provide meaningful input into the solution. All of that comes together, and you can do really big things in a short amount of time and have really big impact on your company or organization.
I love that. I love this idea of kind of the meaningful innovation, meaningful steps, right? Don't make them too small, but make them meaningful. That's a really interesting thought. And also that idea of have people invested in it and bring a cross-functional team together with functional integration and platform knowledge. That's a really unique thought. Thank you for sharing that. That's really fascinating. There's also another dimension to this, right? Which is, if we think about innovation projects, is really the risk dimension, in terms of, are we taking on too much risk by changing a core piece of the business process or changing too quickly? Alex, what do you see companies do in terms of mitigating risk, or in general, how do you see the riskiness of these projects?
Yeah. So I'll take it super broad, all of the different dimensions of risk. I think what Junaid had talked about, when those certain things and lessons learned are not in place, that creates problems of their own and risk of their own. And making sure that you have kind of a operating model, a governance structure, a steering committee, involvement from parts of the organization, defined up front is critical for the success of the project long term. I think specifically to your question around impact to process, that's getting kind of more into the weeds of governance, having the right toll gates up front before you kind of approve a process to move forward into production, or I'm sorry, move forward into kind of build? Do we have a security person, review this or identify if there's any particular kind of application issues or SOX compliance that we need to make sure we're addressing? Do we have the right lower environment available for effective build before we promote into production? Kind of having really a defined checklist that supports New York. I think it's fireworks. We've had, I don't know if you can hear it in the background.
Can't hear it, no.
Yeah, sorry about that. So making sure that you have toll gates along that process that are able to identify those potential issues before you get to them, when it's too late. And then I think also when we talk about automation, there's kind of this idea of rogue bots doing something that like they're not supposed to do. And there's almost kind of a, not as much anymore, but like a little bit of a panic, both within kind of employees as well as other security teams and internal audit. What are you doing? What are you automating? How are you automating this? Like, how are we going to control this? What happens when auditors come? And so I think there's a part of just an education with the enterprise and different stakeholders, of both the governance model that you're putting in place, inbuilt security controls within the platform, the change management component that Junaid had mentioned. And then the last kind of point around kind of risk management is just the inbuilt capabilities of the platform to be able to identify and remediate risk. DM, you had talked about that. Of just kind of inbuilt guardrails and things that kind of come out of the box, as well as what you can configure. So you're identifying potential kind of risky behavior or actions before it impacts you.
That's really interesting. Now, you bring up a really interesting point, Alex. I was thinking about this more in terms of risk of the project, but you actually brought up a really good point in terms of process risk, right? Whereas if you have an automated process implemented with the right platforms, and I think DM touched on this earlier too, then it's automatically much more auditable than it was in the past. So you're actually reducing risk of the process by implementing these types of automations. That's really interesting. Thanks for sharing
that. Yeah, especially things like process mining that are allowing you to kind of have that process intelligence to identify, is almost kind of replacing some of that internal audit kind of manual reporting.
That's so true. That's so true. A lot of our conversations on process mining are with the internal audit teams and teams that want to have that insight and understand how the process is run. There's another really interesting audience question here that I want to give to you, DM, if you don't mind, which is, this whole resource gap we talked about earlier, right? And AI being a very expensive technology in general. How do smaller companies cope with that in terms of being competitive with larger enterprises? What's your thought on that, DM?
Yeah, no, I think that, there is a big opportunity for smaller enterprises today because, again, these modern tools are becoming ubiquitous and they can leverage all these technologies to build solutions from scratch. They have the freedom to not be stuck with, legacy stack. And so, definitely these tools help innovate faster with less resources, because these tools are so powerful, including AI, and they can sort of helps them bridge the gap between a large enterprise and a smaller company to be able to innovate. We are one such company, actually.
And that's right. There you go. Yeah. Actually, there's another question just kind of to double down on this, DM, which is, the question is basically, as the skill set is globally distributed in some ways, right? How do you really hire effectively and monitor productivity across such a distributed workforce?
Yeah, that's actually very, very important in order to tap a global marketplace. So I think what Alex was saying, I completely agree. I think there are two things that is needed here. First is ability to observe how a user is interacting with the enterprise application. Where they are clicking, or they are downloading, uploading, copying, pasting, and basically sort of understanding what sort of issues they are running into, what kind of training needs they have. So that needs to be inbuilt into the platform. And as we empower them with all these tools, modern tools, we also need to have the guardrails, which Alex brought up. where we need to
Right.
make sure that there is data not being leaked onto these AI tools, for example, or getting
Right.
some
Yeah.
hallucinations, what they refer to, into your applications. And so we need tools that where sort of these observability aspects and the security aspects are inbuilt. And that's the only way to sort of tap anybody from anywhere to do the work for you.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you, DM. Now we've seen, maybe 2020 was the year of machine learning. 2021 was the year of process automation, and 2022 process mining. 2023 is Gen AI. Junaid, what's next on the roadmap? What are you guys looking at as the next big thing?
I'm the wrong person, Eric, for this question. I'm an adopter of technology, and I'm always on the lookout for valuable technology that can help our organization execute to our goals, more effectively or more efficiently. So, I think we definitely have already started working with our IT organization. Right now, we are one of the companies, like DM said, that have we've blocked Chat GPT type sites, but we are internally working to create a private area where we can manage that, like I think many large companies are. So we are going to leverage the technology, and I think it's very exciting time to leverage that generative AI technology. Again, it's just all one other part of the augmentation strategy. That's the way I look at it.
That's awesome. Alex, what do you think? What's next?
Yeah, I'm just trying to make our customers successful with the thing that was like hot in 2020 still. So I'm like, please,
there's enough to do there.
It's a year to just catch up. I think probably just the continuation of Gen AI and how that kind of continues to like ingratiate itself into processes and technologies. Currently we have our UiPath Forward conference that's in Las Vegas, and I tuned into a keynote, and they showed a demo of being able to type into a browser, build me an automation that goes into LinkedIn and requests, this person by clicking this button, enter, and it outputs the actual automation script. So it's almost like automating the development of automations. And so I think that's, at least for the UiPath side of things, kind of where we'll start to really see a lot of improvements, is reducing really the burden on building building automations.
That's great. Ours is actually going in the same direction. We just announced this digital assistant called Joule, and it'll be able to create, SAP focused analytics dashboards just with a prompt. It will be able to create apps for specific business process or enhancements. That's a pretty cool area. Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
DM, what's next?
That's as simple as I'll need it to be for me to use automation.
There you go.
That's as full.
DM, what's next on your roadmap?
Yeah, so I think that, using all these AI capabilities, we are building these co-pilots, one for each tool. What we need, and I think we talked about it earlier, additive to human race. So what we all need, given the sheer amount of data being thrown at us, is a co-pilot for the human being across the tools to be able to help us navigate the sheer amount of information that is being thrown at us. So Alex talked about the workflow automation. And so, we sort of need a co-pilot across these tools, but then when we are interacting with these tools, we need to also have these guardrails built into that as we navigate these tools through the co-pilot. So that needs to be part of it. We need to be careful what we are playing with as well. So,
that's awesome. Well, we are at our time here. I wanted to really thank my amazing panelists for being such good sports, and the answers were so inspiring. I took a whole bunch of notes while we were talking here, so I'm super excited to follow up on those. And with that, Ravi, I want to give it back to you.
I want to thank everybody for attending today, and the whole bunch of questions. We didn't get to a bunch of them, but there were a number of great questions. And to all of you, Alex, I know it's late where you are, so thank you for joining. Junaid, DM, and Eric, especially you for this energetic moderation of the event today. Thank you, and I'll hand it over to my colleague Olivia. Olivia?
Yeah, thank you so much for joining everyone today. Alex, Junaid, DM, Eric, for being a part of the panel and moderating. But yeah, so we'll go ahead and wrap it up here. And then for our audience, just make sure to join our meetup group. And then the recording will be up on our YouTube channel tomorrow. So yeah, have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Great.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you, everyone.
And thanks
Bye.
for hosting. Bye-bye.